Catherine. Cool, we're off. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for joining the Midlands Branch Pipeline Industries Guild presentation today. It's very nice that so many people have joined us. I'm hoping that in the not too distant future we'll all be meeting in real life rather than virtually, and I understand from the HQ team that we are very excited for the 64th annual dinner next March, and I think we'll all be very much in need of a live event with lots of people by then. But hopefully in the meantime we might be able to meet in person, but for now the webinars have been fantastic and we've got another fantastic presentation today. So I'm going to introduce Guy Hemlsey from Fisher German. Guy's been with Fisher German. Thanks, Guy. Guy's been with Fisher German, I think, 13 years.
Yep. 13
years, but working in the pipeline industry for much longer than that. Guy's got a really interesting presentation for us today on the HS2 diversions that he's been managing, and he'll take us through that. I'm going to ask everybody if you can hold on your questions, or you can ask them throughout the presentation, but if you can do it via the chat function. So I'll put a note up in a second when Guy starts presenting to show you where to put your questions, and then we'll go through those at the end. There's plenty of time for questions, so please feel free to log those in there, and I'll hand over to Guy.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Good. So we started off liaising with HS2 back in 2012. And there's an awful lot of background preparation that goes into a diversion. Although we didn't construct until last year, we had to do a lot of exploratory work and upfront work in 2019, starting with some trial holes on a cadent high pressure gas main, and also some Western Power 132 kV underground cables. So then we had to do a full service scan where we wanted to come off the public road to our compound. There were a lot of services in the verge there that we had to liaise with the utility providers. We then had to get an ecology report carried out for HS2 before we could start clearing the vegetation. And when you see the slides that will follow, you'll understand what I mean about vegetation in November 2019. And then once we got the vegetation cleared, we had to set about demarcating the working area and also stock proofing from stock in the neighbouring, in the same fields that we were working in. Once we'd done that, we had to do some boreholes to get the profile, for the HDD, the horizontal directional drill. So we made sure that we would drilling in what we wanted to be in and at the right depth. And then construction commenced in January 2020. Not ideal winter working when we were doing pipeline diversions, but we had no choice. The actual diversion, the main works were completed by June 2020, except for the tie-ins, which were delayed until October 2020 due to operational reasons. And then once we'd finished, we had to demobilise and put some demarcation fencing up to keep the main works contractors away from our new pipeline. And the whole project costs circa 2.5 million, which sounds an awful lot of money for a 500-metre diversion, but then it's HS2 and it's very complicated and complex. So I'm now going to see if I can start this. Yeah, here we go. Has that moved on? Yes. So in more detail, the reason why we're doing this diversion is because of this. Can everyone see this is the tunnel portal building coming out of the ground to the east of Birmingham, and then we've got to contend with a road being rerouted here that it is in existence further downstream from there. Go back to here. And that sort of gives you an idea of a more schematic idea. So that's the original route there, and that's the diverted section there. And again, a bit more emphasis on the portal building here. So these are the tunnel portals, and you've got the big D walls on the outside of it, and that's why we had to move out of the way, albeit only by about sort of maximum 30 meters. And then the Attleborough over bridge here. And again, in more detail, we've got this tiny bit of slither of land here, which is quite complicated. That belonged to Highways England, and this was purchased by HS2. But we needed to shift into the toe of the M6 basically to get our distance from the portal buildings. So we started on site last summer, trial holes to establish where the 132 kV cables were, and we had a complete bank of them. There was about there's a joint bay just behind in front of the digger, the other side of the open excavation. So we've got 3 different cables running out of that joint bay. We also at the same time had to trial hole down to the Cadent high pressure pipeline, and we got that to a depth of 2.7 meters, and then so we could then plan the HDD profile accordingly. So works started on the compound in November 19, and then that's the compound there. Sorry, wrong picture there, which is just off the Wateralton Road here. So we had to remove all the hedges. There were 3 hedges to remove in total, about 20 meters of each section of a hedge. And this is the vegetation that we were contending with. It's not it's highly overgrown and full of brambles and self-set trees, etc. And this is the machine we hired in to deal with it. It was a 9-ton tracked flail, which absolutely demolished all the vegetation. And if you look at those teeth, certainly you wouldn't want to be in the way of that. And that's the result after the machine had been through. It just mulches it all up. And if you remember the view from about 4 slides earlier, it's all completely different picture. That's the job where the trees were at their thickest. And then we had to remove an oak tree as well. It did HS2 a favour because it was right in the entrance to the tunnel portal anyway. And for those that are concerned, it was riddled with honey fungus, so it wasn't going to last much longer. And these are the drilling rigs. This is the drilling rig rather doing the samples for the HDD profile on site. And here you can see in November in 2019, it absolutely turned to a mud bath. We were trying to fence off the existing easement, which is here, to make sure that the running track down to the main diversion site didn't affect the current pipeline easement. Once we got that done, we fenced off the stock in fields 2 and 3. And then this is looking upstream. You can see an aerial marker post here. That was field 3-4 boundary. And this is our tie-in point, the upstream tie-in point. And that's what we were dealing with at the end of 2019, an absolute mud bath. But do remember that picture, because it's going to be very interesting when I come to later on in the presentation. So this is the downstream time point, and this is the point where we have to go into the highway embankment here and push back up the embankment. So that we removed all the vegetation behind the highway fence, got rid of the oak tree, and then you can see the contractors reinstated the highway fence 3 meters up the bank, and this is to give us a 3 meter clear easement in the future. So that land, that slither of land, has now been transferred, or is in the process of being transferred, to HS2 from Highways England. And that's the job done. Fence realigned. It doesn't get any drier. This is sort of what we had to contend with, or the fencing contractor had to contend with in the early January 2020. So the contractor arrived on site on the 21st of January, and the first job was to basically put the bell mouth in off the Waterorton Road into the site. And then that's it, all stoned up and a smooth, sort of seamless run off the road into the compound area. We had to lay down terram and stone, and this is to the main construction compound here. And that's an aerial view taken in February of the site. So there we have got our bellmouth here, and this is our main works compound, and then we've got this access track down to the diversion, which starts here and then runs on that way. Topsoil strip underway, and this is still heading towards the working area. And I put topsoil stroke mud because if you remember that previous photograph, it was a lot of mud. And then this is all the line pipe arriving at the main construction site, being unloaded. And then it's a painstaking process of transporting it down the spread to the working easement, working area rather, for storing up, ready for stringing out later on. Topsoil strip completed now and into field 4, and this is really important to get it weathered, i.e., you smooth it down with the back of a bucket to keep the weather off it. And remember, keep that vision in your memory of the mud, because that's what's underneath that. And then we've still got to contend with the fact that we've got our existing asset in the ground, so we had to put bog matting down for vehicle crossings on our existing asset. And this is looking downstream from the upstream tie-in point, so the first point where the pipe diverts with the flow of the pipe, or of the fuel rather, and this nicely weathered bund all the way along the edge here. And this is where we had to cross the cadent and the gas line and the Western Power 132 kV cables. So they're all marked up, ready. And this is the pipe being strung out for the HDD string, ready to be welded up. And then we had to actually swallow it and put a proper haul road in down to the working area to facilitate the diversion. So it's Taram and stone all in down there. It's probably about 300 or 400 meters long. You'll remember that the fact that the vegetation was extremely thick, and none of our service searches showed up an unnamed storm drain, which we covered up outside the working area. We couldn't just leave it there, so we had to get a specialist contractor in to deploy a camera and trace the drain, which we managed to do. They get aerial imagery back, or sorry, not aerial imagery. You get imagery back to a tough-foot screen of what the camera can see down there, and we found that it emanated from this. If you can see, there's a drain cover there, and that's where the drain ran from, and that's probably about 150, 200 meters away from the drain cover we put the camera in. And there's the continuation of the Hall Road. Just as the weather improves, we're still putting down stone, laying the tram. And you can see now at the end of March, we're into quite unusually dry weather last year. Very nice working conditions. And we've got this is the HDD string being put into position, ready for later on. And this is just a few construction shots of the process of a diversion. So welding up the pipeline joints, and that's ready for inspection with or bombing, as they say, or X-raying, and then wrapping, subject to it passing its tests. So this is the string all welded up, ready for the hydro test, which is up to 150 bar to make sure that it's all going to be okay. And then this is welding in a 22% bend, and it's now mid-May as we are now, almost to the year, and what a difference! It's boiling hot then. It's cold and wet out there now. And a nice aerial imagery shot from the aerial patrol, showing this is the HDD string here, ready for pulling back. And that's the drilling rig in place, just starting to drill the pilot hole, the first shot through, and you can track the head with this device, and you can see that it's actually on the screen. It's we've got a depth of 11.22 meters below existing ground level for the drill head. So that's well below the cadent gas main and well below the 132 kV cables and their joint bay. So that's the first shot coming through. So it's come through from all the way down about here, about 150 meters, and come out the ground. And that's the HDD string all ready for pulling back. So in the meantime, further upstream from the HDD, we're getting the pipeline ready, or the trench ready to lay the pipeline as a standard in the pipe trench. And in the forefront of the picture, you've got what's known as a bell hole. This is to help or make it safe for welders to weld up the main sections when it's actually in situ in the ground. And this is probing for the existing pipeline and the downstream tie-in point. And if you look there, it's very easy to see the sand that was put on the surround from the construction of this pipeline back in 1991. So he exposed the pipeline. That's just a bit of pipe in the ground into a bell hole, ready for another section to be popped onto it. And this is an engineer taking the scrapings from the pipeline just to clarify the steel grade to be tied into to ensure that you get the correct weld procedure. That's the pipe being backfilled, the trench compactor, remote control trench compactor, and then marker tape being put above it. And this is a bell hole pipe joint. This is the bend being positioned prior to clamping. And this is a nice shot of the another section with a bend on the end there, being lowered into position. This is further to near the upstream time point, basically. There we are, already on the nice rollers there, ready for pulling back. And that's just a shot of coating the bend up once it's all been bombed and passed. And this is the HDD string ready with the bullet welded on the head for the pullback. There's a dirty grey big shackle on the front of that to hook onto. So in order to get the correct angle, you've got to have, I think we had two 20-ton machines in position to lift the pipe off the runners, and that gives you, if you get it high enough, it gives you the correct angle to pull into the ground. And that's the trajectory that it will continue into the ground at. And that's being shackled up, you know, the bullet shackled up, ready to go. And you've got the, you can see in this picture, you've got the back reamer here, and this will rotate as it goes in. It's another shot. And that's the job done. Pipe string successfully pulled through the HDD profile. So we can say goodbye to the rig, job done. And that's what we're left with, a piece of pipe sticking out the ground. And that's ready for the next stage. So we put on the bend, a 22-degree bend, to get it to the, so you have to dig down, back down the pipeline obviously a bit, and then cut it and then weld it in. And it's just change of direction here. This is the close-up. So they have these open clamps which they hold the pipes in position for the welders to weld through the clamp. And that's it just being completed. You take the clamp off once you've got it started and it's all insecure and in the right place, and then you can complete the weld. And now for the section between the horizontal directional drill, which is down here, and the downstream time point. If you remember, this is the area that we claimed back from Highways England. So we had to peg the pipe back up against the fence here. This is where the trench is going to go. And there we are, trench excavated, pipe dropped in, and sand surround being put in around the pipe. Compactor, remote compactor working, and marker tape installed. So the topsoil reinstatement commenced just downstream of the upstream time point, and I will now refer back to the image that you saw of the really wet conditions and the topsoil being put into a bund which is weathered. And when you do that, your soil will come out in good condition for reinstatement. So this is the work completed pending a return to the site in October to carry out what we call the golden welds, which is the two main welds to join up to the existing pipeline. So this is the downstream time point being prepared, and here you can see very clearly the old trench line with the pipeline that is being replaced. And that's the bend line up that was welded up back in the summer and kept on site to go from one pipe to another. So you still have to do the pressure test on that little bit. I don't know why I put that in there. Right, this is the time point, week commencing the 9th of October, back to wet weather. So we exposed both pipelines again. So we've got the existing one here, and this is the diverted section. And again, at downstream time point, this is once you've cleared the pipeline with nitrogen gas, this is actually tapping into the existing line to prove that it's empty. And then once you've done that, you can cut the section away, and therefore we've got the this is the old pipeline, and this is the new bit. And this is a pipe being prepared for welding, and this is a good bit of kit here. Now I'm a farmer also as well as being a pipeline agent, and when I had one of these in my workshop, it was called the hot spanner, but it actually is an oxyacetylene torch, and you can crank it. There's a little handle there, and you wind it round on these wheels, and it gives you a nice cut at the right angle for then dressing out, and then in preparation for welding. And that's the golden weld completed and ready for X-ray, and that's the X-ray machine. We call it bombing in the trade, for the first golden weld. And that's the job done at the upstream time point. So we've got the old route there, the new route coming in here. Sorry, there's the old pipeline there, and that's the new there. Same thing at the other end. We've got the end cap being taken off that we denzed up back in the summer. Again, preparing we're heating up the pipe there to remove the old wrap, and then again using the same device to give you a clean edge for dressing out for welding. And that's the bend being offered into up to the time point. And it's all clamped into position and ready for welding. These guys, I don't know how they do it, but they are fantastic at their job. It's not an easy thing to do, a proper weld lying on your back upside down. And there we are, job done at the downstream time point, and you've got the old pipeline there. So then we agreed with HS2 that we weren't going to remove the old pipeline. We're just going to ground it up and abandon it in situ. So this is all the pipe grout and the machine ready to fill it full of concrete effectively. And then this is reinstating. This is the upstream time point. Given the fact that the date of that photograph is the 2nd of November, that's not bad. And that's looking back downstream, reinstating all the topsoil again. Once we'd done that, we had to install a demarcation fence to protect the new pipeline, because basically all this area where this spread is going to be where the tunnel portal is. So we got the contractors back in to put another fence up. You note that it's the track machines, and it's a much slower ground pressure, and therefore much more effectively getting through the mud, or not, as the case may be. We're back into really boggy conditions, and this is the tracked post knocker, well and truly stuck. But this machine is sort of quad track forklift, was amazing. It could go anywhere and do pretty much anything, and it managed to get this out of that quagmire and back to work. Then we started removing the haul road. Had to take that away, and then this is reinstating where the haul road was. Given the fact that this is now the 19th of November, and that is all good, friable soil, which can then be seeded, ready for the prepared, ready for seeding, to reinstate it back to agricultural land. And that's how we left it. The site compound demobilised. HS2 are going to take the benefit of that when they start their work, when they started their works this year. That's the end, folks.
Thanks so much, Guy. That was really thorough presentation and covered lots of things. It looks like you've experienced everything, and you managed to get through the whole thing without even mentioning COVID.
Well,
which must have hit you part way through.
We did have to comply with COVID regulations, and it did actually stop the site for a month. At the end of March, we stood down for a month, but then when we got procedures in place and temperature scanners on site. So the first thing would happen when you turned up to site was you'd have your temperatures taken, and if it was not normal, you're sent away.
So we've had some questions, and I'm going to read some of them out to you. Unfortunately, because we're on Teams rather than Zoom, I can't see where the people are what companies they're from to ask the questions. So that might have offered us some context, but I'll start with them. I think the most relevant one to start with first was, which one was it? Yes. So Joanna Hill has asked, was your entire working area, including access and compound, within the HS2 CPO boundary?
Yes, it was, yeah.
So, because that might help answer the next question, which was, what ecological surveys were carried out prior to the vegetation clearance, and did you have any constraints from those surveys?
No, there were no constraints. There were flora and fauna, basically, and wildlife habitat.
And then just on that as well, and I think that you'll probably answer this question, is how much vegetation has and will be reinstated, as so much vegetation was destroyed, but assuming as you passed it on, you've passed the site now on to HS2.
We've passed the site on to HS2. So in fact, the vegetation that you saw initially shouldn't really have been there. You've got self-set trees, which you're allowed to take trees out of your easement, and all the brambles. It was just appallingly farmed land, and it got into a terrible condition. The reason why is because that land was owned by one of these land bank companies with about 1,000 owners from Singapore. So they all have their individual plot. So nothing gets done, and it just goes to rack and ruin, basically. So very little of that vegetation will be going back, because actually it's the main HS2 site, and also it's our pipeline easement working forward, and we're going to keep it we're going to be able to keep it in much better condition. Great.
Oh, sorry, no, I've just missed one. Okay, question from John. Was drilling predominantly through clay?
Yes, it was, yeah.
And what did you do with all the stone removed from the haul road? Was it passed to HS2 for use in other compounds and haul roads, or did you have to do something else with it?
No, HS2 wouldn't pay for it. So it was taken back to the main works contractor's yard, and he's keeping it for another job.
So it will be reused.
It will be reused, yes.
Question from James Cattermore. Did you have any issues at reinstatement with topsoil, subsoil, given the ground conditions and depth of some of the ruts?
No, it was, as I said, I have a lot of experience from an agricultural point of view, and the most important thing about doing a diversion is actually looking after the soil and weathering it in that bund. You can put it into the bund in a pretty horrendous state, but then you got the summer, it dried out, and when we reinstated it, it was good, friable, working soil.
Will the abandoned main be removed as part of HS2 works? If so, why grout the entire length?
No, it won't, and that's why it was left in situ.
So they won't be removing; they'll just build on top of it.
No, they'll just actually the main issue is if you look to go back to that, or if you can imagine, the tunnel portal was close to the downstream tie-in point, but away from the pipe that we've diverted will still be just outside that D wall, so we don't need to remove it.
And just to check, pipe diversion was circa 500 meters of 500 millimeters diameter?
No, it's a 12-inch, so 300 millimeter diameter pipe.
Welded steel?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
What was the wall thickness?
Good question. It was 12.5 mil. It's heavy wall pipe.
And is there any CP on the pipe?
Of course there is, yeah. So whilst there's always been CP on the pipe, and what we did is when we did the diverted section back at the beginning of 2020 and then left it in the ground, we cross bonded from the existing pipe to the pipe that we've just put in the ground to give it protection for those few months before the tie-ins took place.
Question from Bill Attridge. Does your £2.5 million cost include the new pipe and all the fittings?
Absolutely.
And you'll enjoy this question. Why is the welding called golden?
Good question. Golden welds. Well, it's the main weld, isn't it? So it's the top one. That is it's always been called the golden weld. I can't tell you exactly why, but it's the principal weld to tie up the new section to the old. It's always been called golden weld.
Other than ground conditions, what were the most challenging aspects of this project?
Dealing with HS2 red tape, by far the more challenging than the ground conditions. I can tell you that.
And there was another question regarding this. Was there anything you'd have done differently or any lessons learned from this project? Well,
given the ground conditions and the red tape, I don't think we could have done anything differently. I mean, in an ideal world, you would sort of do your diversion works between March and October, not in the middle of winter. So if we had a choice, we would have done it then, but we weren't. We were forced to do it when HS2 wanted us to do it.
Presumably because you've got to fit in with their broader time.
Fit in with their program. So I still get regular aerial images of the site, and it's fascinating watching their works now progress as a result of us moving out the way, and we're now very shortly going to start the tunnel portal building right next to the pipeline.
Where was the pipeline de-oiling operation performed?
De-oiling?
I think they mean, how did you drain the existing pipe? How did you drain that down?
We have to go back to the pump station about 35 kilometres upstream. That's where we can introduce the nitrogen, which effectively pushes all the fuel through to the terminal into tanks. So you clear the fuel out, and then basically that's job done. So all the fuel gets pushed into the terminal.
And Bill has told us that the golden weld is called that because it's not hydro tested.
Correct. It isn't, because you can't. But then you're X-raying it anyway.
Okay. Question from Colin Reith. Did you have to provide your design as a 3D BIM model to HS2, and was there a requirement for it to be fully tagged?
I can't answer that because I wasn't the designer. Penspen were the designers, and I don't think unless anyone from Penspen is on the webinar, I can't answer that question.
Fair enough. And Christina Conway has asked, other than red tape, what were the most challenging aspects about working with HS2?
The sheer volume of meetings that they expected you to go to. And in pre-COVID, you know, we were going weekly to Birmingham to meet up at Snow Hill.
And Joanna has said she assumes you had additional costs for demob and remob to make final connections. So
we did, yes, we did, because of a combination of operational constraints, and also to a certain degree disruption by COVID. We did have to, go to HS2 with an early warning flag for saying, look, we've got these extra costs because of this, which they've accepted. Yeah.
And then I think I've just missed one, sorry, just let me go back up. There's a lot of questions, as you can imagine. What dictated the offset of the pipeline from the D wall? Was it settlement analysis, zone of influence?
Both, and also, vibration issues, etc. So we wanted to be at least 11 meters from the edge of the D wall.
Okay, I think I have asked all the questions that have been logged. So thank you very much, Guy. That was really good to get some discussion going, and thank you everybody for contributing. I think it's really good. It'll be even better when we can get back in a live environment and you can see people face to face and have these conversations, and no doubt they might ask the questions a little bit more eloquently than I do. Just so you know, Guy, there's lots of people saying thank you very much, fantastic presentation, really good of you to share your knowledge and experience on this scheme. So thank you on behalf of the Midlands branch and Pipelines Industries Guild. Thank you very much, Guy.
That's a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you. And so we'll stop recording now. Thank you.